bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 579. Why not just do it? For Monday, February 10th, 2020, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Well, it's time for our annual Analysis of the Analysis show, a look at what the ad world had to say about this year's Super Bowl ads. Tonight we'll look at all the high points and low points, as well as the deeper thinking surrounding advertising's biggest day. Also, the trouble with extended cuts of ads, the downward trend in audio branding, the last-minute Kobe edits, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with freelance copywriter and author, as well as a regular contributor to AdPulp and Talent Zoo, Mr. Dan Goldgeier. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Bob. It's great to be back on the show, as always.
Oh, pleasure to have you on the program. And next, he's the admirable admiral of brand innovation consultancy, the HMS Beagle, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. I almost got it that time.
Yeah, now I want you to say it 3 times fast.
No way. I'm not even going to try. Well, guys, we're here to talk about the Super Bowl. I know we did a rather long discussion last week on the program about the run-up to the game, but now that it's all out there and the analysis is out in the wild and people have had their say, Joe, what's your opinions about this year's game? And I'm talking about the ad game in particular. Was it a good year for advertising in the Super Bowl?
You know, so there are many, many ways that I can address this topic. And the first is to say that, and then I'll tell you my thoughts in a moment. The one thing is, you know, for years and years, I've always said, this is going to be the year that finally Adland, Madison Avenue, figures it out and takes the opportunity, you know, to really just knock it out the park in front of 120 million odd sets of eyeballs. And every single year, you know, the bar just gets lowered and lowered. It's unbelievable. You know, I always have a job.
Explain that. Why do you think the bar was lowered? Because I thought it was a particularly good year for the creative.
Well, remember that, you know, I wrote a little book called Life After the 30-Second Spot in 2004.
Right.
And I set my sights on what I called the Stupid Bowl instead of the Super Bowl. And this was at a time when Bud Light was using farting donkeys. And I thought to myself that we could not go lower. Now we long for the days of the farting donkey back. Because, look, here's the thing. It is such an opportunity, and that opportunity is for the most part wasted. I do one thing, and I've done this now consistently for about 5 years. I don't try and act like a marketing person, air quotes, or an advertising guy. I try and act like a consumer, which means I don't avoid any information. If it comes into my feed, I look at it. You know, I try and just experience the Super Bowl like a human being. I actually happened to watch the Super Bowl at a massive Super Bowl party. It was the almost 20-year reunion of iMedia, an event, you know, that began in 2001, that for the most part was attended by both brands and agency folk that I would say, you know, quite inarguably were pioneers of the space. So I'm sitting here watching the Super Bowl, drinking with the sound, you know, kind of being drowned out by people socializing. And I experienced this just as a consumer, which means I cannot remember more than 3 or 4 of the actual ads the next day. And number 2, And we'll talk about this, I'm sure. So what were my reflections? 90, first of all, if you're manic or if you suffer from ADD or are prone to seizures or any of these conditions, this was your Super Bowl because it was cut, 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 cut. It was so manic. And it was like 1980s called and they asked for their borrowed interest back because the number of mentions and shout outs of 80s memorabilia and movies and movie stars was kind of overwhelming. And at the end of the day, it was just this mush of stimuli overloaded my senses, and I just picked up groan after groan after groan with one or two ahs, one in particular round of applause. But other than that, people were just shaking their heads. And these are people inside the industry going, my God, these guys just it's just gone from bad to worse. What do you think, Dan?
So, I mean, I agree with some of what you're saying. I thought that this year we saw a lot of celebrity overload. I think too many of them placed in spots for no good reason. But to piggyback on what Joe is saying, I think for the last several years, the Super Bowl has been kind of in a rut where we get generally speaking, the same effect every year. We get a handful of really good ads, but a lot of forgettable ones and a lot of over-the-top things. And here we are. It's 1 week later. We're recording this. And 75% of the spots that I saw, and I watched the game pretty straight on without a lot of distraction, I can't remember. And I think that one of the biggest problems that I've seen with the Super Bowl year after year after year is that marketers and brands are trying to win the day. They're trying to win the moment. They're trying to win maybe the week and a half slightly before with some of the run up and maybe a couple of days later. Nobody has a plan for what's going to happen this week, this month, 6 months from now. I really think that if a brand can come along and put a launch spot together for a long-lasting campaign, something that's big, something that's bold, and something that lasts, they will be in a much better place 9 months from now, a year from now.
I'm not sure that
and I know that is not the point of this Super Bowl. We are seeing so many of them just try to get into the ad meter, and that's it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that didn't happen. I'm not sure that a lot of campaigns weren't. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of campaigns that were launched during this particular event. I don't know that anything really stood out, and I think I hear the dissatisfaction from both of you that it wasn't something that was memorable. It wasn't something that just kept you saying it over and over again and wanting to play it on YouTube over and over again. Nothing really rose to that level for me either. But it's just like I think a lot of
a couple for sure.
But there were a lot of campaigns that were initiated during the Super Bowl, which will last over the course of this year.
Like which one? Like what do you expect? Which campaign do you expect is going to last here?
Oh, Planters is going to do something. I mean, it's just like for all the trouble that we had with Planters ad. I mean, it's the whole killing off their mascot was silly, but
so Baby Nut. We're going to watch Baby Nut grow up. Is that what we're going to do?
We're going to. I have no idea what we're going to do, but they've got a campaign.
Baby Nut. Sorry, Baby Nut. Okay.
They've got a campaign. So say Snickers is got something that they're working on. I mean, Porsche is launching their new electric vehicle now. I mean, it's just like a lot of these ideas were just to launch something that now does have a plan to continue out through the year.
Well, I would like to join forces with Dan and gang up on Bob. Because
it's just like I don't think that this particular year was a great year for Super Bowl ads. I mean, I thought it was good year for Super Bowl ads, but I thought it was a pretty decent year for launching forward campaigns and making a statement that begins the marketing for the year. I think that it did well with that, but it proves that's blocking and tackling, and it's just not exciting.
I want to piggyback on what Dan was saying, because he was talking about a plan and a strategy 9 months out coming into the Super Bowl. And I would like to add on that and say, I would like to believe that there is actually a plan and a point of view coming out of the Super Bowl for the next 9 months. But I have less faith perhaps than you do. I mean, case in point, it's, from what I read, the Jeep, I know we'll talk about it, right? But the Jeep ad with Bill Murray,
Yeah.
apparently only 10 days prior did the agency have this brainwave that it happened to be Groundhog Day. And
Well,
on one hand, kudos, unbelievable what they were able to pull off in 10 days, by the way, without actually a buy in hand. But seriously, we should not be having these epiphanies 10 days from the big game.
that's not quite how that one went down. I think that there were some articles afterwards that came out that the CMO had met Bill Murray many, many years ago, and they tried for weeks because Bill Murray is a notoriously hard guy to get a hold of, and they didn't know until 10 days out that they could do it. But the idea had been lingering for a while. Now, that was one of my favorite spots because that is the epitome of a great Super Bowl ad in and of itself, and I don't care what they do next week. That one was just fun. I saw that the morning of the Super Bowl, and just very iconic when you see Sonny and you hear Sonny and Cher, you see that clock, you know exactly where you are. It was a lot of fun, and I knew that was going to be the top spot of the year.
And I have to say, that was the only commercial that actually crossed my feed on Facebook. And I have a lot of industry people and work types, but I also have all my friends and a robust personal network on Facebook as well. And it was the only one that got my attention that I actually watched in advance. And by the way, speaking of which, the only ding that I would give them, and I'm not trying to be critical for the sake of being critical, because I mean I'm looking for, I to this day I talk about the Hyundai commercial during the whole mortgage meltdown and the whole credit crisis when they said lose your job, give your car back. That is, or Denny's kind of Grand Slam breakfast, the free breakfast. When you've got a platform like that, you better use it. You should use it in a sense. But the only ding that I would give them, I was thinking to myself, I wonder what percentage, again, it dates us, right? But I wonder what percentage of the audience had never heard of or watched Groundhog Day. And I'm not trying to look for criticism. I just wondered. I was just curious. For us, it's a cult movie, and we've all watched it. We probably could mouth every single, word in the movie. But anyway, that was the only downside.
Go ahead.
I think I would probably say that movie has transcended some generations, and also Bill Murray himself has got a lot of popularity, even with young folks. I know it may be somebody who is 15 or 20 has not seen that, but somebody tweeted out that the average age or the median age of Super Bowl watchers is 47. I would say that they probably hit that spot pretty well with this one.
What I wanted to, I'm going to blend the next topic into this first one, because I'm itching to talk about the extended cut problem, because it used to be that a Super Bowl commercial would be the extended cut. You'd get the best possible version of the commercial on television, and they would then cut it down for 30s and 15s for the rest of the year, and they'd run it in other places. So, I mean, and the cut down version is never as good as the extended cut, the longest possible version of the ad. And it seems like everybody had an extended cut that was way better. I mean, way better than the actual commercial that ran during the game. And I'm wondering, is that laziness that the commercial that runs in the game is not as good as the ad that ran on YouTube? I mean, it seems to me like the story should be a complete story in the game ad, and if you want to do an extended cut, it should just add some funny moments. But I'm thinking about the Porsche ad. I mean, the Porsche ad made no sense during the game other than they stole a car. The whole thing about it being a tag game and about them all being the security guards, even the guy who stole the car, and it's just this game that they play. I mean, that whole thing was completely lost in the actual game ad.
Yeah, I think I think you have to take that on a case by case spot by spot basis, because I think in the Super Bowl spot, 60 is probably the ideal length for a lot of these spots. The aforementioned Jeep Bill Murray spot, somebody, I think it was either in the brand or the agency, put up a 90-second version of it with a little extra Bill Murray fun. And it didn't really add a hell of a lot more to the 60 itself.
I agree that.
But, I think a lot of times it's a lot like the director's cut of a movie. If you watch, you go from 2 hours of a movie to, 2 hours and 50 minutes, and you get a lot more fat on things. Having said that, though, the Smart spot for Hyundai, I am seeing it now as a 30-second spot on TV this week after we saw the 60 on the Super Bowl, and the 30 doesn't work. The 30 doesn't work at all. The 60 is much better. So I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I mean, a lot of folks are trying to make extended 1.5 minute, 2 minute stories, and I don't know that I think a lot of it is just fat. I don't know that there's much more to be wrung out of it. Maybe in the Porsche case,
for me, the biggest offender was Snickers, because with the Snickers ad, it's practically unintelligible that you're going to feed the world a Snickers, and that why are they doing it? I mean, it's just like they don't build enough of the case. They cut so much of the song out to get it into a 60-second spot that it no longer made a cohesive sense. If I hadn't have seen the extended cut, I probably wouldn't have gotten the ad, and I wouldn't have been feeling good. And I felt like I was cheated when I watched it in the game. I'm like, oh, that's not even the same ad.
Yeah, and that's a song, with a lot of buildup. So the concept is probably rooted in a 2.5 or 3 minute song.
So when I watched the as we will now refer to it, the aforementioned Jeep ad, online, I watched the director's cut or the extended cut, and I absolutely loved it. And I remember actually one of the little jokes was when he's they're driving together, and he goes, "Remember, hands 10 and 2, 10 and 2." And then when we watched the ad actually live on the Super Bowl, I didn't think it had as much bite, and I was actually a little disappointed because I love that extended cut so much. So I actually kind of went, it's weird, I went in the other direction, as opposed to looking at a cut and then being able to say, hey, like I'd like to watch, deleted scenes, bloopers, and the extended cut. I have to tell you, and Dan, you probably will back me up on this. We people that understand the business, whether we come from the creative side, or are focused on television, but specifically people that have been working in digital, and in particular, we've all been begging, praying, demanding, for the extra content, for the deleted scenes, for the bloopers, for the extended cut. And we've always been faced with an uphill battle against the installed creatives that were trying to make the perfect 30-second spot. The bottom line, and it goes back to when I wrote Life After the 30-Second Spot, it wasn't about the death of television advertising. It was about the death of status quo and mediocrity, and trying to force fit all of this into a 30-second container. So the ability for us to actually go and do you remember back in the day, Nike had this great scene. I forget the actual, it was this chase going on, and to see how the commercial ended, you had to go online. Why are we not going back to a simple best practice? All it requires, I actually want to like hit my head against the wall to the point where I actually pass out because of the stupidity of our industry. All it needed was just a little bit of text, called copy, white print, for God's sake, that says, see the extended cut online.
Well, Turkish Airlines did that. I mean, it's just like they launched a series of content showing Americans going and traveling around the world for the first time. The 3 different or 4 different people who had never traveled out of the U.S. are now going to be flown around the world, and you can follow their travel logs. I mean, I think they did get it. They did get the message there.
I didn't know it advertised. Did you remember?
I saw the Turkish spot on, but I did not it didn't register to me that they were doing extra content. The tricky part about that is that if you do that in the Super Bowl, you are asking people to stop whatever they're doing, whether you're at a party or you're watching the actual game or you're waiting for the next spot, and you're asking them to go down this content rabbit hole for another 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes. And I don't know that that behavior is going to be very successful in the context of the Super Bowl.
Right, but it can't hurt just to like, you're not wrong about that, but just the ability to like, I mean, when you've got this massive, filter, and you're going to lose some people along the way. I mean, I didn't even know Turkish Airlines advertised in the Super Bowl, and I watched the damn thing. So it's like, even if you're just catching 1% of those people, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean,
a lot to ask. I'm not even sure you're getting 1%.
I mean,
I remember Coca-Cola tried that a few years ago when they had some polar bear content that I think ended up crashing their servers. I think there were a lot of people who were interested in seeing what they were going to do. But again, you're asking people in the moment to completely change their behavior. And I just don't know that it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, that's like the Turkish Airlines. Turkish Airlines is a good example of launching a campaign because that's their campaign for the year. They're going to be following these people around. That's their content digital campaign, and they launched it during the Super Bowl. And now all the ads from Turkish Airlines are going to be pulling on those same levers. I mean, I think that that's a smart strategy. I mean, I agree with you, Dan. I mean, it's just like these ideas that say go online to find the rest of the spot or the extended cut is not the right ask. It's more about, you can follow these people and we're going to be telling you about them coming up over the next 12 months. I think that's a smart strategy. But when you're asking them to change gears now, that's not a good one.
Yeah, and I hope they have ways to promote that because I think they've probably lost that moment, at least for me and Joe.
It wasn't a great spot. I mean, it really wasn't a great spot.
So we also have to ask ourselves this question. I mean, this is all great debate and great conversation, right? But some of the questions have to be, why? Why are some of these companies even advertising on the Super Bowl? And I'm going to give you 2 examples. And the only reason I even remember them is because I actually made an attempt for the show to remember them or to do a little bit of digging and discussing. So the one was right at the beginning was an ad for Quibi. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the creative. I don't remember what Quibi is. I just remember looking at Quibi and going, what the, like, who is this company? And there was no reason or incentive whatsoever to even find out more. So that was the one. But the other one, and this is more of an egregious and recurring offender, which is, I think it was for Rocket Mortgage or Rocket Fuel or something with a rocket. And it was maybe one of the funniest spots. Everyone was roaring. Was the one with Jason Momoa, who takes off his
Mortgage
muscle suit, etc.
Yeah.
It was so damn funny. And then I'm like, this is the funniest spot. And then it's like Rocket Mortgage. I'm like, what? like if you had given me 100 brands or 1,000 brands, I would not have said that's the brand. And so that's the other thing. Constantly, what we're doing is we're even when we get the creative right, we come up with a really awesome spot. You look at the brand associated with it, and it's a disconnect. And so those are 2 things as well that frustrate me, because in some cases there are some brands that maybe shouldn't be advertising on the Super Bowl, and in other cases there's almost a strategic, or I should say a disconnect between strategy and creative, so to speak, or at least brand association. I don't know what you guys think about that, but it confuses me.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a disconnect between actual branding and the effort to get a creative that is going to get a lot of buzz and win the ad meter and potentially get you a Cannes Award, a Cannes Lion. But I think that there's a real problem between brand and idea most of the time. I mean, there are real tenuous connections. Do you agree, Danny?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is where it always helps. I know, Joe, you were at a big party with media and advertising folks. Go to a big party with people who do not work in this business or have no connection to advertising, and they will scratch their heads half the time when they see a logo at the end of a spot, and they have no idea why the first 45 seconds of what they just saw has anything to do with it. I didn't. I understood the connection in Rocket Mortgage, and I thought first off, I didn't know who that guy was, and to me that puts me at a disadvantage. If some people didn't know who Bill Murray was or never saw Groundhog Day, well, I'm the flip side. I didn't know who Jason Momoa was. So you have to think about it, and I think the most successful ads are the ones where there's, and we'll talk about this in I think in the next section, there's a lot of repetition, a lot of, and a direct connection with the product in some way, in some memorable way, hopefully.
And by the way, sorry for calling you Denny. I almost said Denny G. I turned into Bill Green for a second there and started.
I thought it was endearing. Could you call me Joey?
Okay, Joey and Danny. Okay, yeah. Joey and Danny's Big Adventure. Hey, there's some numbers here though that we need to cover. One of the numbers really surprised me. That Amazon spot with Ellen and I'm blanking on her name, but Ellen's wife,
Porsche de Rossi.
Rossi. That's it. Yeah. That was the most watched game ad on YouTube during the game. Now, can someone explain that to me? It was a okay ad. I didn't think it was incredibly funny. Am I wrong about that?
It was a good spot. I think there's a lot of visual interest there that you want to maybe go back and say, oh, that there was a lot of visual gags and it was expensive as hell to produce, I'm sure, because you're going through time and all these major setups. I think it might have been fun to just loop back and see, okay, this point in time and how they pulled it off. Maybe Amazon had gotten a lot of online traction or did a lot of self-promotion to try to drive traffic to YouTube to get it more watched. So I thought it was a good spot. I didn't think it was a one of the best, but
I loved it. I mean, I thought it was so hysterical, and I kept on waiting for more, Monty Python type of lines, because it seemed that was the direction that they were heading in. But I thought it was hysterical, and it got everybody's attention, and each clip was pretty funny. The funny thing for me with that spot is the actual product that they were advertising, which I guess is the in-car Alexa, is the most horrible product. It's just clunky. It's like this device that has to go on, like with a suction cup or, into the old cigarette lighter, and it's just unbelievably just ugly. Instead of being something that you would hope would be kind of activated through your phone and Bluetooth or whatever the case may be. But regardless, I mean, that was a well-executed spot. Why was it the most watched on YouTube? I don't know.
I think there's just a lot of visual interest that you want to go back and maybe check out, because I think there are several setups that, you blink and you miss them. It might just be worth going back and looking.
Now another. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I just want to go back to the other Porsche, not Ellen's Porsche, but going back to the Porsche spot for a second. Again, no call to action afterwards. But I went back and I looked at the little tagline, right? Finally, an electric car that steals you. First of all, that's not even a good line. And second of all, it drives me insane that you just saw this big, elaborate, massive. How much money did they spend on the media, on the production, etc., all to deliver the punchline? Oh, I get it. That's why they stole the Porsche, because it steals you. And I had no idea what the tie-in really was to it being an electric car. And in addition, there are media, there are media and brand concerns I have, right? The media one is Porsche does not need ever to be advertising on the Super Bowl. I've had this debate even with brand people who work at Porsche, because they want it to be this aspirational, they almost are banking on the fact that 95 or 99% of people watching will never be able to afford one, because they want to create this, aspirational kind of coveted, elusive brand, which is BS, right? The other thing is, like Porsche with an SUV and going electric. I don't know. It's again, the tyranny of line extension, diluting the essence of what this brand is all about. Of course, a company and a brand like this, an automotive brand, has to move with the times and has to consider where the world is heading. But, here is Porsche putting all of its energy and equity in electric with a very, very poor tie-in to ultimately what the whole gag was or setup, which admittedly, Dan and I were saying we didn't even get. So it's like, when you look at this, believe me, I'm trying to be a good cop today, but it is so hard. It's so hard. That's why I just love the Cheetos ad with MC Hammer. Just give me stupid Cheetos, and get my fingers orange and remind me. I bought Cheetos this weekend, the flaming hot Cheetos, and my stomach is killing me today, so I mean,
now what you got to do is go to a market that has the jalapeno Cheetos. Now those are phenomenal. Those are phenomenal.
Fire, yeah,
they're really great. The flaming hots are just hot for the sake of being hot.
Bob.
Yeah, well, I think Porsche could do better to just do an ad that says, whether their name is Porsche or Porsche, and just clearly tells us what we should be calling them, and that would be an ad. I think that would be a much better ad for them. But getting back to the numbers, Genesis had the most lift, most brand lift, and for the life of me, I don't understand this one. I mean, was that ad that charming? Because the extended cut was bad. The ad that actually ran was bad. I mean, it's not a good ad, yet it seemed to have resonated with a lot of people.
That one was what? That's not the Smart Pock one. That was a different one.
Genesis was the one with John Legend and
a different Hyundai, okay, or something.
Yeah, it was the high end Hyundai, right?
That might be your answer right there. I didn't know what you were talking about.
Me too.
I think it's just celebrity power. I think it's people who like John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, and I think we saw a lot of that this year. Just celebrities everywhere in every spot, and I think if you've got a high Q rating or whatever it is, you're popular. People will want to see more of that, and the celebrities themselves will go continue to promote those spots that they were in.
And one that I totally agree with is Google got the most effective spot, and I've been saying since at least a week before the Super Bowl when I first saw this ad, this is hands down one of the most powerful ads I've ever seen. It makes even the creepy product that Google has actually seem wonderful and part of my life, and I can't live without it. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, think about the technology they displayed there. It can remember everything. It can store all your memories and photos. It knows everything about you. It's the creepiest ad ever, yet it's
I
so
was creeped out
wonderful.
By it. Thank you very much. I think it was well done. I don't think it was nearly as charming as the Paris love story one they did many years ago. But maybe it's because I'm the only person in the world without a Gmail account, but I just thought it was creepy. I'm still creeped out by it.
No, I agree. I mean, Google, Google, that spot that you were referring to was just unbelievable, and obviously that's the lane that they've chosen. They've chosen the lane of decidedly trying to hit the heartstrings as opposed to going with slapstick humor and borrowed interest, etc. And I mean, if you think about it again strategically, that's pretty much how Facebook launched itself to consumers, but specifically to advertisers, which is telling stories of real people and human beings, and ultimately how Facebook was able to unite this person with that person, and of course we know all the stories of the whole Arab Spring, et cetera, et cetera. So that lane seems to work really well for them, and it wasn't just them this year. I mean, the other one that the only ad that actually got applause from the room that I was watching it was the one for New York Life.
Really? That surprises me. That was a good ad, but I didn't see it as being an applause-worthy ad.
Yeah, somebody in one of my friends who works in advertising in New York posted it a couple days later and said, that one was a really lovely spot. And I think that you run a risk when you do something that is a lot softer and a lot more muted tonality wise in the Super Bowl, because it probably is a wonderful spot. But I remember when it came up, I wasn't really tuned in to what they were saying, and I know that there was some on-screen copy as well as the rest of the story.
Well, the subtext of that particular commercial is they took that copy or that whole idea from probably an evangelical sermon, because that was what it was. I mean, the whole filial love, eros love, agape love. I mean, that's that's 101 in evangelical sermon material. And I'm like, maybe that's why it was so appealing to so many people, is because it struck a chord with some kind of religious approach or some kind of religious feel to it.
Yeah, I just think it's a risk to run a spot that's muted in the game. It's a contrarian idea to try to do it, but sometimes it just doesn't work, and it probably, outside the realm of the Super Bowl, it's probably a wonderful spot, and that's why I think so many advertising people would be drawn to it.
Hashtag old people, hashtag AARP. That seemed to be the best practice this year for both of those spots. But I tell you that it's the contrast, right, Dan? I mean, it's the fact that when you're seeing MC Hammer after MC Hammer after MC Hammer after Flavor Flav, I'm sure he was in there somewhere. It's at some point you see something that's quite arresting, or at least different. And I was just going to add, I know we're going to get to this in the next topic, but I've always said this, and I've been quite one track about this. To win the Super Bowl, and I mean really win the Super Bowl, meaning ROI, meaning ad effectiveness beyond winning the ad meter, ultimately you've got to create a spot that doesn't really need voice. That doesn't. You've got to be able to tell. You've got to be able to tell a story without really using words. Yeah. Music helps, but even without that music, you've got to be able to tell that story, and that's why those spots get attention, because they're not copy heavy, and so and they're also not as manic in terms of the way that they're cut together.
Well, let's talk about attention, because one of the things we've talked about a lot on the show over the last couple years is that voice branding, audio branding, sound, how important it is in the creation of a TV commercial, especially considering that the audience is having a lot of attention deficit problems. As soon as the commercials come on, whether you're in the Super Bowl party or not, you're talking to a friend, you're getting chips, you're grabbing a beer, you're looking at your phone. And audio cues are really super important in grabbing your attention. And we were seeing that infect the Super Bowl over the last few years as well. A lot of ads were starting to employ audio branding tricks to make sure that they had sound effects that were recognizable, tones, music, things like that. We saw a drop in that this year, though. It went from somewhere around 20% last year to somewhere around 14% this year of the ads were using it. Why do you think there's a drop this year, guys? Is this what's going on? Is this just a fading of a fad or a gross oversight?
Well, I don't necessarily think that for the Super Bowl ads itself you need what you would call an audio logo or a theme song. I think what helps in these situations is repetition. I think it's things like Smart Pock, or like I said earlier, the Sonny and Cher bit from the Jeep spot, where you know where you are, and that is the audio cue that gets your attention. I think what we're seeing more in the Super Bowl is use of type on screen and bright color backgrounds, like the Sabra hummus ad, which was nothing but sort of day glow and very bright colors, which they've continued online with some of their Instagram posts and other things, because advertisers know, first off, you're at a party, the sound is not always the most prominent thing that you're seeing. You want to, at a party or something like that, and advertisers also know if they put an ad online, people will watch it without the sound. I think being visual in this case is more key than audio in a game where people are not paying rapt attention. The other thing is that these are one-off spots for the most part. Any sort of audio branding, is more of a long-term play, and I think you see that with insurance companies, Liberty, and all some of the other types of advertisers that just hammer it and hammer it and hammer it month after month, year after year. I don't know that all these spots need that necessarily if you're trying to get that one hit in the Super Bowl.
And by the way, we have to just touch on that for a second. This, if you ever wanted a clear sign that our industry is going to hell in a handbasket, it's the fact that the actual jingle is liberty, 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 liberty,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like, hello, why not just for 30 seconds, just shout out your name 500 times?
Oh, it's the worst jingle in the world. It's terrible.
I imagine the conference where the conference room when they presented that idea is they sang that 10 different ways. They sang liberty, 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 liberty 10 different ways, and they made the client pick one.
And they're like, this is your equivalent of make the logo bigger. We're going to mention your brand name 58 times in 5 seconds. Sold.
Yeah. But I think that, like I said, I think the audio, the key to doing that is repetition, or something that people can just hang on, not just something that comes at the end of the spot.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the end of the spot. I mean, I'm particularly concerned with the beginning of the spot. Because when you start a spot and you have something that's very recognizable, it grabs your attention. If the sound's up, it grabs your attention back to the screen. And I think that's the most important thing. I mean, like at the beginning of the Alexa, at the beginning of the Alexa ad, the Alexa sounds draw you to the screen, not Ellen's voice. I mean, you may recognize Ellen's voice, but what draws you back to the screen is that Alexa sound. And, those types of moments are so important toward grabbing attention in a Super Bowl setting to make sure that you're there for the entire joke, or you're there for the entire story, or you're there for whatever you're trying to get across. I think it was a missed opportunity. It was a huge oversight to not employ audio cues at the beginning to make sure that people's attention was on the screen when you wanted it to be.
Well, I think we've just discussed. I mean, we've basically made the point that there are 2 points, right? The main point is you really are up against it, recognizing that even though you have these 120 sets of million sets of eyeballs, most of them are drunk, and either the sound is turned down or people are just screaming like maniacs, right? Because they are. And by the way, it was a pretty good game to watch for a neutral. And so on one hand, there's no amount of little, Honda or Toyota little dings at the beginning are going to get anybody's attention. But on the other hand, going back to what you were saying, Bob, it can't hurt. That's the same point I made with respect to a call to action. It can't hurt. And it just seems like, I don't know whether people have given up or whether they're just so damn lazy or just the arrogance and the hubris continues to kind of overtake them. But that's why I'm so disappointed with this crop. I remember years ago when I was a little bit more connected to this on a day-to-day basis, there was a stat always released, maybe somebody did it this year, what percentage of the spots actually had a URL in them. Remember those things called websites? I don't care whether we're directing people to an Instagram profile or these days a TikTok account.
You never thought you'd be asking for a hashtag in a spot, did you? You're asking for
hashtags, anything. I'll take anything at this point.
What AOL used to have something like the keyword this. Those were there in the ads for a while. Well, I want to move on to the last topic of the night before we get to the fair, fail, foul. And this one is kind of weird because the ghost of Kobe Bryant was kind of over everything this year. I mean, the game at the beginning had a moment of silence for the man. There were advertisers from Planners to Genesis to Hard Rock International all re-edited their spots at the last minute. I'm wondering, guys, are we being way too oversensitive here, or was this a smart play? Joe, you take this first. What do you think? Were we being too oversensitive to the fact that Kobe Bryant just died in a helicopter, so we need to take our helicopter out of the ad, which is what Genesis did, and Planners had to shortchange their whole funeral thing because Kobe died? I'm wondering how much of a connection the audience was making with that.
I mean, I would say for the most part, having the sensitivity to edit a spot, given, the tragic news of Kobe's death, that can't be a bad thing. I think it's kind of sad that you end up with these spots, some of them, for example, that even needed to be edited in the first place. And in the case of planters, and I'm really, I mean, it gives me no joy. Actually, it gives me a lot of joy to like to keep beating up on planters. But how indulgent, is this brand to like care so much or not care at all about this stupid antique mascot that they have to go and kill him off. I mean, it's somebody just like drinking, not to mix mascots, but drinking their own Kool-Aid. Wait, it might be the same company.
Yeah.
And so and so they created this whole ruse, and nobody cares about the Planters mascot. And by the way, in this particular case, the fact that this mascot died in a fiery crash, absolutely they had to edit that spot. But you know what? Sometimes you get lucky in life. And in this case, this was them not being lucky because they didn't deserve to be lucky. Because at the end of the day, way, 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 in my opinion, too indulgent. So they got what was coming to them. But in this particular case, absolutely, they had to edit the spot. In some other cases, maybe they were a little bit too sensitive. But I think you really want to, if in doubt, you definitely want to err on the side of caution in something that is so emotional and emotionally charged and tragic as this.
I think they needed to do a Guardians of the Galaxy crossover and have the Peanuts start going, "I am Groot." I think that would have been much better. Go ahead, Dan.
I'll pay for that.
Yeah, and I think this was an extraordinary case because Kobe was such a singular figure that just cut across sports, cut across pop culture. We're recording this tonight at the Oscar. During the Oscars, Spike Lee came out on the red carpet wearing a outfit that is literally a suit that is a tribute to Kobe. So there's still a bit of mourning going on in Hollywood and pop culture. But going back to the Planters thing, I remember that they killed off the Planters peanut before Kobe passed, a few days before Kobe passed away. And then what happened is they continued a lot of the promotion for this was online, and a lot of it was on Twitter. And the Planters peanut Twitter account was literally signed from the estate of the Planters. It was all in black, and it was from the estate of the Planters peanut guy, or from the estate of Mr. Peanut. So on the day that Kobe passed away, you saw a Twitter feed that was heartbreaking posts, and then Planters had no choice. They had to come out and change something, because all of a sudden you've got anybody who had a Twitter feed full of general pop culture things saw a lot of Kobe content, and then this. So it came across in bad taste. They really had no choice but to start dialing it back a little bit, at least for a few days. And as far as the other two spots, the ones with the helicopters, it's probably discretion is the better part of this at that point. I don't know that anybody made an instant connection between, we can't show helicopters anymore, but it's, Kobe's passing was still raw, and brands need to be very sensitive to that always. There were a lot of folks, again, the day Kobe passed away, on Twitter said, now would be a good time for your brands to shut off your Twitter feeds, just because social media is so visceral. You feel it a lot more.
For sure. Shutting down the social accounts made a lot of sense, and I think the Planters doing that was really wise. Taking all helicopters away from TV spots seems like it's an overreaction. I mean, it's just like, I agree with you guys. It's probably. It's better to be safe than sorry, not having to make apologies because we were insensitive because we had a helicopter in our ad at the time when you're mourning the death of your basketball hero. But at the same time, it seems like it was a little excessive and a little bit fearful. But I guess that's the way brands have to be. Well,
you have to be tuned into the cultural moment, otherwise you're just going to get a lot of hate for it.
Yeah,
you may not get any long-term hate, not a long-term blowback, but definitely in the short term, you get a lot of protest for being insensitive in moments like that.
And just to like speculate a little bit, I mean, what a real earnest attempt, which of course could have the potential of being called out to be too opportunistic, but would have been a brand that had some association with Kobe, or had supported something connected to Kobe, that it was said, we're throwing out our entire Super Bowl spot and we're going to do a tribute to Kobe, or the ability to actually take those media dollars and invest those media dollars, pull out of the Super Bowl and invest those media dollars, maybe, not invest them, but donate them to the families of the other people that passed away in that accident. I mean, I'm saying at the end of the day, if you really care, then you're going to demonstrate how much you care in action. And the problem is we live in this skeptical, cynical time where even that earnest attempt to do good could backfire. But for the most part, I think it would have been nice to have seen a brand do that. Even a brand like, I suppose I would imagine Nike probably had the most connection to Kobe, during his life. And if memory serves, correct me if I'm wrong, gents, but memory serves, when Kobe went through his scandal, I don't think Nike bailed on him. If it was in fact Nike, that would have been an amazing attempt for Nike to come into the Super Bowl at the last minute, or to do a deal with another company and buy that spot. That's the kind of, I don't want to call it media creativity that we need, but it's the kind that actually demonstrates companies have a soul.
Yeah, I can see both sides of that. I can see it as being cold and kind of very calculating to do something of that sort in that situation. But I can also see that there's a lot of heart to it if it's genuine. If you can get away with the genuine desire to do a tribute because you're a noted fan, that might be something that would work. But otherwise, I could see it as being way too cold and calculating.
Yeah.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do some shameless plugs, starting with Mr. Dan Goldgeier. You can find him at dangoldgeier.com. That's where you can buy his books. You can hire him for copywriting. You can read his many articles. Tell us what's going on in your world, Dan. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, now's the time to be thinking about next year's Super Bowl, so I am available to write that spot for you if you want. Never have had that opportunity.
There's always a first for everybody.
There's always a first time, I guess. So you can see my work at dangoldgeier.com. You can also go onto Amazon and buy my book, Killer Executions and Scrub Decks, an outside-the-box look at obnoxious advertising and marketing jargon. And all proceeds from the sale of my book go to feed my dog.
Congratulations. I love the fact that you got these books out. It's great. And another man who has a lot of books, Joseph Jaffe, you can find him at the HMS Beagle. That's where he is consulting with brands and helping them to flip the funnel, live their life after the 30-second spot. I'm trying to work all your books into this, and it's not working out. So you take over, Joe. What would you like to promote?
I thought it was working out perfectly. All you have to do is finish it off with "and suck less."
Suck
the key
less.
to success is to suck less. But I got to tell you, Dan's plug couldn't have been more perfect, because for people that don't actually know a little bit of inside BeanCast, Dan wasn't even on the show originally, and he very kindly stepped in at the last minute. And I agree, who more perfect than to make sure that you are not ridiculed and lambasted at next year's BeanCast wrap-up show by yours truly, then, hire Dan. That's a
Thank
no-brainer.
you.
On my side, not much more to add after your beautiful butchered lead in, Mr. Norpener, but I'm really promoting my. It's funny, Jaffe. I did this iMedia reunion in New Orleans this past week with about 85 of some of the people that have attended and really built this industry. And when I left Shy Day, the agency, my last job that I had, I was approached by iMedia to start writing a weekly column called Jaffe Juice. We actually branded it as Jaffe Juice, and it became my entire persona and my online brand. Every single one of my social media channels is Jaffe Juice. Well, eventually I turned that into a blog And now I've kind of like evolved it to just become a weekly newsletter called The Juice. And so if you like some of the stuff that I talk about as a regular on the show, and you want to sign up to my weekly newsletter, I'm writing weekly, a weekly thought leadership piece. You can either subscribe through josephjaffe.com, or otherwise, I'm sure Bob will provide a link in the show notes. And I would love to have you, just join up and dare I say, plug another of my books, join the conversation.
That's great. Yeah, and definitely, if you get a chance to get on his newsletter, do it. The man is smart. He's got a lot of years in the business, and he knows what he's talking about. So you definitely want to sit around and listen to Joe talk for a while. That's why you came to this show. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. For me, the fair of the week is still Loretta from Google. The hell with y'all for not agreeing with me.
Well, Loretta's husband, he's going to get an email the next week after he does all this. And, Loretta would really like you to take out a reverse mortgage spam email. And he's going to get Loretta's cousin really needs you to wire $5,000 so he can get out of Argentinian prison.
I can't help that it's creepy. I can't help that their product's creepy. The ad just made me feel warm and fuzzy. I loved it.
and mission accomplished.
Speaking of which, even before I started writing Jaffe Juice, my very first column I ever wrote was for FourClickZ, and I wrote, "I'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission." And the whole point was Amazon started sending me emails, even though I don't recall subscribing to them. So in the whole creepy vein, and I remember the first comment was a scathing rebuke by Seth Godin, who, of course, had written Permission Marketing. And I thought at that point I would never, ever write another article again. I think my argument then, and still now to this point, is, we talk about creepy, but you know what? When it's relevant and when it actually is useful and meaningful, it becomes slightly less creepy. And that's our balance, right? Our balance is always trying to balance the creep with something that really can be transformative. And I guess that's why you loved it so much, Bob, even though it was creepy.
Well played, well put. Well, let's move on to the fail for this week. The fail is the Manhattan Bar and Grill, which is not in Manhattan, but in Liverpool in the UK, failed to get their Time's Up memo and introduced a smaller cut of steak to the menu called the Ladies' Filet. Obviously, they were lambasted for their sexism in doing this. They, on their part, say that women have been asking for a ladies' portion for years, and they decided to fulfill that request. I'm still going to call this one a fail. Dan, what do you think?
Well, my lovely wife never finishes her food when we go out to eat. She admits that. But I also think you could probably have easily called this, petite fillets or some other, way of not assigning a gender to this.
Apple's done that with their watches. I mean, you got a smaller watch and a bigger watch. You don't have a ladies' watch. You have a
right. What are they doing? What do they do in golf courses now? They used to have ladies' tees. I don't know if they still do. I haven't played golf in a million years.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wonder what they call them. Now, I was just thinking this actually could be the next creator for Peloton, which is, have a wife that keeps finishing her ladies' fillet, buy her a Peloton. What do you think?
You're just combining all the fails from this year.
Is it a Super Bowl spot, do you think?
It may be.
Probably not.
Well, the foul for this week, Joe, is Vienna-based digital company Bitpanda bought a whole bunch of digital billboards throughout the UK on Brexit Day, all of them reading, "Millions of people can't be wrong unless they're British." It was such a great troll, but it obviously pissed off a lot of people. What do you think about this one?
Well, I'm actually not sure who is British anymore. So maybe they're, the enemy of my enemy is my Brexit. I don't even know. This is the opposite of target marketing. This is turning the target on yourself.
Yeah, it's really kind of weird. Well, have a suggestion for the list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's pound fair fail foul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
Joe?
Mm-hmm. The admiral, the mod, whatever.
It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.